Hi there. For today's video, I'd like to show you what sold for the month of January. Now I sold probably around 150 items, so I've just selected a few of the interesting ones to show you for today. And my name is Lee, if we haven't met yet, and I'm the founder of listingtofreedom.com, where I teach you how to make money online. I myself have made over $50,000, mostly off of selling used clothes online, specifically on eBay. So I'm going to show you today some of these sales that I had for the month of January. So I'm going to switch you over to my computer screen so I can show you. All right, so this is the first one, and this is a vintage sweater. I'll click through some of these pictures for you. So it's kind of just funky. It has flowers on it. And I use the keyword kawaii, and that's the style that this sweater is. So I listed it December 23rd, and it sold just a couple weeks later. Next is this Torrid swimsuit, and this was brand new with the tags, and it sold for $42, and it did take about 2 months to sell. And then next up is this vintage overalls, and these are from the Gap. And I'll click through so you can see what that vintage Gap tag looks like, because it definitely looks different than it does now. And this just sold in a couple days. So, and it did have a little mark, a little wear on the cuffs, a little bit of dirt, and that's totally okay for these vintage style overalls. That's what the cuffs look like. And then there's that vintage tag that I was mentioning. All right, next up are some vintage LL Bean men's jeans. Now these ones were flannel lined or plaid lined. So you'll see I rolled the cuffs so that you can see the red plaid on the inside. So I'll click through these. Now it did have a little bit of glitter, which was funny because they were men's jeans. So I just had pictures. There you can kind of see the glitter. And I stated that in the description, and they still sold within a week. And this is pretty much a staple for me whenever I find American Eagle men's jeans. Those always seem to do way better for me than women's, both with how they sell and for the price that I'm able to get for them. So these particular jeans did have a lot of wear. I started them on January 27th, and I believe that they sold the following day. So $18.99, and they did have quite a bit of wear on them, some holes that are factory made, but they were also worn out a little more than new condition. So a little wear in the crotch. They still sold for $18.99. All right, next up is this really cute little girl's vintage dress, and it has Red Riding Hood on it. So you can see Red Riding Hood there, and it's kind of like a dress with an apron over the top. And this one, as soon as I listed it, it got just a ton of interest, offers, and watchers, and all of that. So I just kind of sat on it, and it still sold within, I think, a day or two. This next one's another vintage dress that I sold this month. And I don't remember if this one had a brand. So let's see. Sometimes these vintage dresses are handmade. They may not have a tag. Now it's not uncommon to see safety pins, so you'll see this here. There's a safety pin on the dress, and that's how they used to attach some of the decorations back in the 80s. So I think that's from that bow. So the bow there is attached with that safety pin. It's not like it's fallen off and it's put back on. That's just how those things were attached then. You'll also see safety pins when there's little rosettes, and those will be safety pinned on. All right, so next is a vintage crewel embroidery kit. So if you're not familiar with crewel, it's just a type of embroidery where the stitching is kind of on the surface. And I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. So that's what that pattern looks like. This looks to me like it's straight out of the 70s, but for whatever reason, these are in demand. The vintage ones are in demand, so $25 plus shipping for this guy. Okay, so here is another overalls, and let's see, I listed this November 3rd, so this was about November, December, January, 2.5 months for these to sell. And the funny thing about these, so these are Key. It's not a particular brand that I would normally look for, except that these were vintage. And also the sizing was a 60-inch waist. So that tells me that there's not a lot of other overalls this size out there. And this is the reason I got them, that and being the vintage. The funny part is when I got these, there were other resellers who decided they weren't going to get these because they don't sell well. Well, I've sold them before and I know how much I can get for them. And I don't mind paying a little bit more for these just because I know I could get the 44 plus shipping. And these do have a little bit of staining. If you can see that through the knees, there's some staining. So they're not in perfect condition. If they were, I would be able to get a little bit more money for them. All right, next are some cool, I think is how you say it, men's pants. And this is a super popular brand, one that I love coming across. The resale value on cool, whether it's men's or women's shirts or pants, coats, all of it. I've never had a bad item. So this one went for $42 and it sold in just a few days. Okay, so next up is this Quacker Factory. Now, Quacker Factory, I believe, is a QVC brand, and a lot of their designs are really kind of wild. So this particular one has stars. See if I can zoom in. The pictures on this one didn't turn out great just because the color of the shirt was really dark. But you can see it there. It has stars on it, and then it has rhinestones, and it's a velvet material. So it's just really unique. And when I found this, I was like, oh, somebody's gonna love this. So it did take a little bit to sell. It's I listed it November 10th, so it took 2 months to sell. Okay, so next is this little Coach purse. This is a vintage Coach purse, and I love to come across these vintage purses in the Coach brand. I don't do so well with the new Coach, I guess, unless it's brand new, but these vintage ones always do pretty well. So here's what it looks like close up. And it did have some wear on the inside. So you can see that's the stamp there on the inside. So let's see, I listed this January 19th and it sold just within a couple days. Okay, so next I have this funky dress. And this one also sold very fast. I listed it January 14th and it was gone within just a few days. So anytime I find a muumuu, this is a muumuu, no matter what it is, I always get it because there's always somebody out there that's looking for a muumuu. So $18.99 plus shipping for that. And then this vintage Abercrombie men's shirt, and it was super heavyweight, super thick. I used the keyword workwear, and let me show you what that vintage tag looks like. So there's that vintage tag there for you. Abercrombie isn't a brand that I normally go after, but whenever I come across the vintage, particularly in men's clothing, that's something that I'll look up and check comps. And the comps on this were pretty good. Okay, so next is this little girl's Obermeyer's Snowsuit. Obermeyer, I should say. So this one I barely listed January 12th, and that sold, I think it was within the week that these sold. All right, and then vintage men's Levi's jeans. And the way you know these are vintage, for one thing, they're made in the USA. And then, see if I can get a close-up for you. So they're kind of like a pinstripe white and gray, which was really unique. I actually wasn't able to find any comps on these, so I listed them high. And I did take an offer on these for $50, I believe. So the price here, for whatever reason, when you go and look at the sold, it's not showing what I took for the best offer. So I listed them for 100, and then I ended up taking an offer for 50. And here's what that tag looks like, and then there's that inside tag. So you can tell that's different than the current tags for Levi's today, and then also that made in the USA. And the fun thing about this one is it did go to Japan. So when I listed it, I knew that there was a good chance that this would be going overseas because Levi's vintage seems to do really well in places like Japan. And it surprisingly went to Japan. So, or unsurprisingly, I should say. All right, next, I had not heard of this brand before. It's called Mack Weldon, and these were some, I guess, golf pants, you would say. So here's what they look like up close, and then let me show you the tag, because I think that's always helpful to see what the tag looks like rather than just trying to remember the names of these. So there's that tag there, so Mack Weldon. And this is one that I came across. It seemed like really good quality, really well made. I hadn't heard the brand before, so that's one of the clues. Like if I haven't heard of it, maybe it's something special. So I look it up, and this one did happen to be worth quite a bit. All right, so 511 Tactical Series. This is another bread and butter item for me. It's one I can find regularly, and it sells for this $20 to $30 range. And these are, flip through some of these pictures for you. So these are often worn as uniforms. So there's what that looks like, 501 Tactical. And if I remember right, these went to Puerto Rico. And when you ship to a like one of our territories, Puerto Rico or Guam or any of the other territories, it's actually a domestic shipping, so you won't have to worry about figuring out international shipping, which is kind of cool. So January 6th, those were listed and sold within a couple weeks. And then this one I had to show you just because it's so cute. So let me zoom in on this. This is a vintage Christmas sweatshirt. And this did sell in the month of January. So if you come across Christmas things, don't worry about holding on to them. Go ahead and get them listed, get them out there. Again, it has them made in the USA. So that's good whenever you see that. I started it December 29th, sold in January. All right, and lastly, a vintage Eddie Bauer men's coat. This was Goose Down. December 30th, listed, sold a couple weeks later. And I'll show you what that vintage tag looks like on the inside. So that's the last item I have for you. Thanks for watching. And if you'd like to learn how to sell, be sure to check out my reseller bootcamp.